So welcome to the coding section of this lecture. The first thing to make sure is that the Docker daemon is running on your taskbar if you're using Windows or the Mac. And also to make sure that if you're using Windows, go into the Hyper-V manager. Make sure that the Hyper-V VMs are running, the ones which you created in the previous use case. And then let's go into PowerShell in case of Windows, Terminal in case of the Mac. Let's run PowerShell as an administrator in case you want to run Docker machine. And then open up scripts.txt on the 10th use case, copy the path, navigate to that directory, and then execute the first command, which is to see what machines are running. As you can see, there are two virtual machines. We're going to use the first one. So the way to use the first one is go back to the scripts folder, execute this command if you're on Windows. Copy the last statement, same is the case for the Mac. Execute it. And then go back to the Docker machine ls command, and you should see that the first one is active. Now we are going to work on the first Hyper-V VM1. Now that we have activated the Docker machine, I've navigated to the directory where the Docker Compose file is present. So if I do a dir or ls, it's going to give you this. So what I recommend doing is to go back here and then execute this command to be able to build the image. Now this got built very fast, and the reason being, if I look at Docker images, you will see that Pictolearn Dispatcher and Web, which recently got built, were relying on Ubuntu JDK 8 and Tomcat 8 JDK 8. In case you don't have this on this machine, it's going to pull it. So please bear with it for a few minutes because these are bigger files. And as you can see, one of them is even a gig in terms of space required. So please keep that in mind. And you can go ahead and execute the next command to run the container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this off, and then I'm going to run the containers. The first thing to note here is once I do Docker Compose PS, there is one web container, one dispatcher, and one MySQL. The second thing to note here is the web does not have a port, and the reason being, we actually disable the port here. So the only way to communicate is to use the dispatcher. So let's see how this can work. I'm just going to do Docker Compose logs-ft and then web. So it is starting up. I'll wait for it to start up. As you can see, this thing started up. So I'm going to go to Postman. First thing to note here in Postman is I'm using the Docker machine's IP, and then the port is defined by the dispatcher port, as you can see 1111, and then I'm using the context path of Pictolearn dispatcher. What I mean by that is if you go into the dispatcher's log, you will see the context path is Pictolearn-dispatcher. It says dispatcher here. If I go back to web, and then what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to open MySQL client. So, and I'm going to start from fresh. Let me close all of this. So what I did was I was able to make a connection into the MySQL running inside that machine. So the way I did that was I connected to 10.0.0.187. If you're wondering where I got this from, if you remember, docker-machine ls basically gave me all the machines running on this machine, and we were running the above containers on the first one, and the IP address is 10.0.0.187. So I gave it, and then if you do Docker Compose PS, as you can see, MySQL is running on port 8888. So I just gave it a test string, stored the password in the vault, and I tested the connection. It says connection is successful. I closed it. I logged into this container here, got into users. I just said select start from users. and then clicked OK. There's nothing in the database. So what I'm going to do right now is I just mimicked, as I said in the previous lecture, I just kind of mimicked what we did on use case in the previous use case, and I just renamed it to this one. Apart from that, I also made sure that it's HTTP. It's hitting that particular machine on port 1111 with the context path, and obviously we're going to call the servlet, which is going to do the magic for us, and also the RESTful URI. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say send, and it says success. And if I introspect the headers, it's going to tell you which machine it actually hit. So in this case, it's 172.19.0.3. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go and check in the MySQL database to make sure there's an entry. As you see, it got inserted. So, so we are sure that whatever we wrote up is working. So now let's go to the scaling part. Now what I'm going to show you is to find out how we got the web host header from here. So what we can do is we can log into the root of the bash shell for the web container. And if you see here, it's running on port 172.19.0.5. Okay. And if you log into the dispatcher, so this is where you're getting that information from. All right. So Docker internally manages the IP addresses, and this is the way you log into that specific container. All right. So let's go ahead and scale up the apps. So in order to scale up the apps, we first start with Docker Compose PS, and then we do Docker Compose scale web equal to 3. Now if you do this and then go back to PS, you will see that it spawned 2 more web containers. Now this can be used for load balancing in case your traffic receives more load. So just know that Docker allows you to scale microservices. It makes it more elastic. And the reason why we have the dispatcher is to be able to route to one of these. So that said, give it a few minutes until it starts up. And typically for logging from all these containers, we use tools like Loggly. There is a tool called Loggly, or Dynatrace or App Dynamics are performance monitoring tools. If you're running it on AWS, you can also host it on CloudWatch. So give it like 2 or 3 minutes until all the containers start up. So basically, I'm just going to query this. I'm just going to list all the records in the database. And as you can see, it's 172.19.0.6 right now. And basically, the dispatcher is picking up a random IP and just hitting that IP. And then right now it's being load balanced to a certain degree, or being routed using a very simple algorithm of picking up the random one. So that's what we did in the dispatcher. So just bear that in mind. And as you can see, you can also add users right now. So I added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to go to MySQL database, look for all the users. So the total of 8 of them. So I'm just going to query again and go back to the body. So as you can see, you'll see all of these here. Okay. If you need to delete somebody, just click on send and it's a success. So when you list users again, it's going to have 7 of those. So I deleted number 1 here. So that's basically how you scale up and down. So I just have to show you how to scale down. So if you see there are 3 containers in web, in case your load decreases, you can just make it 1 again, and it's going to remove 2 of those containers. And that's about it.